Welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
Okay. Well, then it is my great honor to introduce Noliwe Alexander. She's coming into us from Oakland, California. She's been studying Vipassana meditation for 20 years, over 20 years probably. She's a graduate of Spirit Rock's Community Dharma Leaders Program, the fourth iteration of that. East Bay Meditation Center's Commit to Dharma program as well. She also went through Spirit Rock's teacher training program. So we have a lot of programs that she has benefited from and can share with us. She's also a founder of a nonprofit that offers healing from intergenerational and ancestral trauma for people from the African diaspora. And Noliwe dedicates much of her practice, much of her teachings to the BIPOC communities, the LGBTQIA+ communities, at-risk communities, and elder communities. We're really, really grateful for your presence, Noliwe. And before I turn it over to her, I wanted to mention that Noliwe is offering her time to us tonight freely, her time and her wisdom, as is the tradition of many Dharma teachers. So any dana tonight, any generosity that you're able to offer will go fully to Noliwe, and we really greatly appreciate your generosity and acknowledgement of her time and wisdom that she's sharing tonight. So thanks so much, Noliwe.
You're welcome. Well, hello, everyone. Hi. It's good to I am absolutely shocked at, I had no idea how big your Sangha was. Liz and I did not talk about it, and everyone started coming on, and I started counting, okay, 25, 35, 45. And we were up to 55 people, and it is such a delight. Really great to be here. What a beautiful Sangha. That's great, great numbers. And thank you for the invitation. I really feel that this is the right place for me in this moment to be here with you. I just want to say another thing about myself, and that is I am the daughter of Larry and Marge Alexander, and I'm the granddaughter of Maggie Levy and Sydney Alexander, both from Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm also the granddaughter of Laverne Jones and Elizabeth Jones, and they came from Texas by way of Kansas and Colorado. I'm a mom, and I'm a grandma, 4-year-old Calvin, and I'm also a wife. And I know that this path that I'm on right now, the same path that we're all on, for me, it has been paved and opened up by my ancestors. So I pay deep, deep respect and honoring of those ancestors every time I begin, because I know that I stand on the shoulders of so many. So I just wanted to give you that bit of introduction from my voice and a little bit about myself. So just kind of the trajectory, I'm sure it's probably the same as what you all do as well, but we're going to have about a 30-minute meditation. We'll have a 5-minute break. I'll do a talk this evening. If we have some time and I don't go over, which I tend to do because I get a little talky, but if I do go over, then we'll go straight into a closing, excuse me. But if not, we might have time for some questions and responses, some Q&R, or we might do breakout rooms, I'm not sure, but probably just some Q&A or Q&R. So that's kind of the trajectory for you this evening. For me, it's the afternoon. It's actually 4:00 in the afternoon for me here in California. So why don't we start just by settling into our seats, whatever that may look like for you. It might be any of the positions or postures that are most comfortable for you. You could be in a seated position. You could be on a chair or on a couch, in your bed. You could be lying down. You could be on a cushion. You might even be standing or walking. Any of these postures are appropriate. And I'd like to invite you now to just, if it's accessible to you, to close your eyes. If it isn't, then feel free to just lower them down, just with a soft gaze right in front of you. And if you'd like to actually even keep your eyes open during this meditation practice period, feel free to do that as well. And I like to always feel as though these periods of practice and meditation, it's my gift to myself. So I hope that you feel that way too, and you can have that enter into all parts of your senses. So as we begin to just settle a bit, finding some comfort in your seated position or whatever that might be, just checking into your body. You may already know how to just take an inventory, perhaps starting at the top of your head on down throughout your body to see if there's any tension, any places of tightness. Or you may start from the feet up. Just checking in, inquiring into the body. Knowing this gift of time is yours for these next few minutes. And bringing your awareness to an anchor of your choice. It could be the breath. It could be the sound. It could be birds outside your window or a hum of a refrigerator, whatever that anchor might be, that brings you back to this present moment, allows you to return. And as you find something that is a natural rhythm, be it the breath or sound or even your heartbeat, begin to settle into that, just making note and being aware. I'm breathing. I'm seated, my body. Nothing else is expected of you right now. Just finding your natural rhythm. And as you begin to soften your body from your first arrival to the seat, just be aware that that's happening as well. Removing any obstacles, tension. If your mind becomes lost in thought, just return. Just gently return. Noting the thought that may be arising. And perhaps just seeing it fleeting away. remembering to return to the anchor. If your mind begins to wander in thought or planning, just come back to your home base and finding some spaciousness in the return. Feeling into all the sensations that are arising. And then softly coming back to your breath. Feeling into if there's any tension that has arisen in your body. Just notice it. Make small adjustments if necessary, finding some more ease in your practice. And perhaps for a little bit more alertness, you may just take some deep cleansing breaths. The diaphragm, all the way, feel your lungs. And then exhale. And after a few times of deep breathing, come back to the rhythm, your rhythm. Back to this moment. Dwelling in your true nature. And as our practice begins to come to a close, I offer you this poem by Rumi. I said, "What about my eyes?" God said, "Keep them on the road." I said, "What about my passion?" God said, "Keep it burning." I said, "What about my heart?" God said, "Tell me what you hold inside of it." I said, "Pain and sorrow." He said, "Stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters you." So I invite you just to listen to the bell all the way if you can. Listen to the tone and then gently open your eyes, taking a deep breath in. Thank you all so much for your practice this evening. This evening, my talk is going to be on the hindrances. And many of you maybe already know them, have already felt them. I'm sure you have. But this talk is entitled The Seduction of the Hindrances. And I have to tell you, when I first heard the word seduction used, it was used by Joseph Goldstein. I was sitting a long retreat about 8 years ago at IMS. And coming from Joseph, it was quite like almost a shocker. Like he said, seduction of, this is Mr. Mindfulness, and such a stellar teacher. And I wasn't quite sure why he chose that word. But after I heard his talk, I actually got it. And what it was what I call, kind of tongue in cheek though, the hook. Not like vaudeville, but it's the hook that keeps us kind of hooks us into a particular mind state. Pema Chödrön also uses the word shimpa, that place in which you just kind of get carried away, get into it. And the Buddha named these particular mental states as objects of the mind, the hindrances. And they are, for those who may or may not be familiar, but most of you probably are familiar. There are five hindrances that just kind of creep into the consciousness. The first one is desire or sensual desire. And of course, when I first heard the word sensual, I just was like, okay, now we're really onto something here, right? But it was a hindrance, so I couldn't quite put it together. The second hindrance is ill will or aversion. And I could kind of get with that one pretty easily. The third is torpor, or also you'll hear the word sloth and torpor. And we're going to go into all of these a little bit. The fourth is restlessness and worry. And that's with your practice and in your body mind states. And the last one, and for this one, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many of you have ever experienced doubt? Yeah, my hand is way high, right? And so those are the five hindrances. This is what the Buddha was saying, that this is what comes into the mind and actually is an impediment. The interesting thing is that it has this alluring power to it that we're not even always aware of. And that's how we get seduced by them. Because sometimes with some of these, they become so almost subtly seductive that we don't even know we're kind of being wrapped away with them. And all of these, even though we know this is not the path to freedom, right? This is not the pathway for us, we still get hooked. We still, as Pema Chodron says, it's that shimpa, right? We get way laden heavy into it. And these hindrances don't just appear when you're on the cushion or sitting in a chair in meditation. They're every day. They're in our everyday lives. And we're going to go through them a little bit so we have a better understanding. But for me, I get curious. I get really curious about when I learn something, and there's all of these lists that, of course, the Buddha has given us. You know, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 7 Factors of Awakening, the 10 Paramis, the 10 Perfections. You know, these are the 5 Hindrances. There's aggregates, all of that. I get interested to find out, how do they actually interact with me or relate to me in a way that's my true nature? Are they impeding upon the process of me actually finding my true nature? Or are they aiding in it? So these are questions that I have. I get interested. And then I start to do this investigation. What's underneath it all? Because that's where it gets kind of juicy, right? What is this? Because I know somewhere there's a path that takes me deeper into that true understanding of what I'm experiencing in the moment when I'm being in meditation. And I really want to make that differentiation, because we spend so much time doing. I mean, right now we're doing Zoom, right? The new way of learning and teaching and being together in community. But the differentiation that I'm making is that state of beingness. How are we being with this? So while we can have open view in the investigation, we can begin to look at what happens in the mind. That's where we start going underneath and underneath and underneath. What allows our mind to become open, more pliable? What is it that closes our mind and constricts us? All of these hindrances are part of it. These mind states, as the Buddha said, this is part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. These mind states that keep us noting, keep us, if we are aware, keeps us looking at them as they arise. And if we're clear enough in vision, we can also see them dispel themselves. And it takes effort. It really does. But it takes also curiosity. But the one thing I'd like to invite you to do as we start learning a little bit more about these hindrances is not to become a passive participant in it, but become an active curiosity participant, because there's something about your practice while you're on this path that you're really wanting to look at, you wanted to touch into. Oftentimes it's called the indwelling state. But the mental proliferation in what our mind does really begins to, at times, impede us on this path. And as we experience these hindrances, at least awareness of the hindrances, it starts to be like on a day-to-day basis, right? And then we get to glimpse from a different view. It's like putting on a pair of glasses. Mine are right now pretty dirty, but if I was to clean them up real good, it'd be like, oh, I got clear vision now. I can actually see through a different lens how I am not moving at the speed of trust, not moving at this place where I really want to within my mind, heart, body. And it actually allows us to see where we might be sitting in ignorance, where we might be sitting in our own suffering, where we might not be even aware that we're not, I don't want to keep saying not, but that we haven't found that place of freedom, that we become mired in it. And when we begin to look at the hindrances in a skillful manner, we can actually become happy to see them arise. I mean, it sounds crazy, right? Doubt, happy? I'm happy to see doubt come up. But it really is about your awareness of it. It's not doubt itself. It's, am I aware of it in the moment? It may not even change, but can I become aware of it? See it arising. Investigate it. What's on the underbelly of it? That to me is it's just a wonderful place to begin to look. So one of the things that the Buddha said very explicitly, when we attend to the hindrances carelessly, they cause lack of vision, lack of knowledge, are detrimental to wisdom, tend to vexation, and lead away from nibbana. Well, I want all of those great things. You know, I want knowledge, I want vision, I want wisdom, I want it. Of course, I want it all. That's the seduction, right? Because I become so unaware that there's something that's impeding that process for me. And we also have to look at our habituation, our habit mind. There's a subtlety that happens there's a subtlety that happens with these hindrances. They're almost as if, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a moment, they have a disguise. They become comfortable for us. You know, restlessness, worry. At some level, we don't want it, but because we know it, it's in our closet. We go and we put that coat on called restlessness because it's comfortable. We go there because we're familiar with it. I had the great fortune many years ago, probably, I'm going to say about 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to sit with Bhante Guttaratana, who you may be aware of his book, Mindfulness in Plain English. He's a Sri Lankan monk who's now living in West Virginia, actually. But he had such a huge impact. I did a metta retreat with him, but it was so profound, some of the things he said. But I picked this up, which is more about the hindrances themselves. And I'll give you this quote from him. You can't ever get everything you want. It is impossible. Luckily, there's another option. You can learn to control your mind, to step outside the endless cycle of desire and aversion. Because those two are the beginning of where we start with the hindrances. I'm going to go into them, but there's such a seduction that happens, especially with greed. Right? I mean, there just is. And what I would say is ill will or aversion. We become so comfortable with moving towards the things that are pleasurable and moving away from the things that are unpleasant. And that's all somewhat part of the foundations of mindfulness sati itself. This Vedana, this pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral state of feeling, sensations, emotions. And every time that we are in meditation, like we were just doing, and your thought becomes more prominent than the breath and you start being carried away, sometimes if we just take a moment to investigate what that thought is, there may be a message there for you to take a look at. And maybe it comes to you like, okay, I'm adverse. What's underneath my adversity? Anger. What's underneath my anger? Deep rage. What's underneath my deep rage? I mean, you can just keep going and going and going. And then pretty soon, once you give it, you take away its energy, it starts to dispel itself. So what I'd like to do is kind of talk a little bit about, first, a statement, a quote from the Buddha, and then I want to talk about these hindrances, and then I want to talk about the antidotes to them. Because it's one thing that we could give a talk all day long about, this is what it is, this is the 5, this is the 4, this is the 7, this is the 10, all of the lists. But how do we work with them in our daily life? That's what becomes interesting to me. So here's a quote, or at least from the text, the Samyutta Nikaya. This is the Buddha speaking. Just as monks, this body lives on nourishment, lives dependent on nourishment, does not live without nourishment. In the same way, monks, the 5 hindrances live on nourishment, dependent on nourishment, do not live without nourishment. And if you're interested, this is the Samyutta Nikaya 46.2. We have to be aware if we're feeding the hindrances as they're arising, if we're staying with them, or are we actually wanting to investigate and allowing them to pass? It reminds me of that story. I don't know if you've heard this story of a native grandfather who was talking to his grandson. And he said, I have 2 wolves inside of me that are warring. And the little boy's like really interested, like, you have wolves inside of you, Grandpa? And he said, yes, one wolf is really kind and gentle and compassionate. And the other wolf is full of anger and hatred and wants to be aggressive. And the little boy goes, oh my God, what are they doing? And says, they're warring against each other. And then the boy asks his grandfather, so which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed. So it's the same thing with our mind states, right? And I actually love that story. I love it. I'm anxious to tell that story to my own grandson, because it really speaks to what we're doing to keep nourishing these habitual habits or these mind states that arise. So as you know, the night of the Buddha's enlightenment, he had the forces of Mara come at him, right? These forces of ill will and doubt and all of these hindrances. This is how he was able to sit this long, because he was able to identify that these were the things that were starting to arise that were not going to get him to that state of nirvana or awakening or enlightenment. And I try not to use enlightenment so much because it's almost overused, but I do love to use the word awakening, because we can awaken in every moment. We have the capacity to do that. So all of these hindrances started to arise as Mara, these forces, started to come at him. They came in all of these different disguises. This is what I was talking about a moment ago. They came in the disguise of seduction. Women were coming up to him, trying to seduce him off of his perch, off of his seat underneath the Bodhi tree. Other forces came: doubt, restlessness, worry, ill will. They all came. These 5 hindrances, sleepiness, torpor. And as the story goes, all of these energies, it's really the energy of them all, started to come to knock him off. And what he said is, the mind will not be moved. Can we get to that? Not easy. I'm witnessing that. It is not easy to walk away from that. To walk away from all of the things that we're so accustomed to, especially in the mind, especially in our mind states. So I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about each of these hindrances and the antidotes to them. Because I think that there's some beautiful ways that we can work with them in our practice. So the first of the 5 hindrances, of course, is sensual desire. And it shows up in all of the sense doors that open up: sight, smell, sound, touch, taste, and thought. It shows up, it just opens up. And those are the things that we actually we yearn for, we move towards, we're attracted to, because they actually have a quality of a pleasant quality. It begins to wash over us, and yeah, I want more of that. But as we move into that, we're actually impeding the process of seeing what is and living in that state of what is happening today, living in that. And it blocks that craving, that wanting, that clinging, that craving. And actually in Pali, the word craving is translated as tanha, Tanha. And it's loosely translated as the unquenchable thirst. So as we're wanting and desiring and, craving and clinging and striving, we can never get enough of it. Just a quick story. Years ago, my son got a new TV, and I think it was like a 40-inch television. I mean, it was huge at that time, right? And I went to his house and we were watching football, and I felt like I was almost catching the ball. The TV was huge. And I was in awe because I think my TV was like a 20-inch or something, it was really small. And literally, he just got the TV. And out of his mouth, he said, I just saw a 50-inch TV. You can never quite be satisfied, right? That insatiableness. I got a 40-inch, but now I want a 50-inch. How many of us have that experience of just wanting more? And how many of us experience that in our meditation? Wanting the pleasantness of what we have found. Oh, that was blissful. I want that one again. We attach ourselves, we move towards it because it was pleasant. So here's the antidote. And this is true for all of the 5 hindrances. Just knowing it arises. First thing, bringing your curiosity, your awareness, and knowing it's arisen. Greed, wanting, desire, craving, whatever name you put on it, know that it's arising in the mind. Another antidote is don't go chasing after it. Just pull back. And possibly it's just going straight to the breath, straight to that home base when you find things arising that way. So sensual desire, as they call it, or greed, wanting, craving, tanha, does have an antidote. Yeah, just know when it arises. The second hindrance of ill will. When I first heard that, I was like, well, I don't want to wish anyone ill, but it's stronger than that. It's really the aversive mind. It's pushing the experience away. It's looking at the unpleasant thought or sensation that arises and saying, I don't want that. That doesn't feel good. I don't want that discomfort or this unsatisfactoriness, which is what suffering is. The antidote to ill will or aversion, the aversive mind. First of all, like all of them, know when it's arising. Know when you're finding that way in which you're kind of pushing away from it. I don't want that one. I don't want to think that. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to have that sensation. And they say a great antidote is actually practicing metta. When you're feeling that ill will, that aversion coming up, drop quickly, possibly, or softly into metta, into loving kindness for self, for others, whatever might be accessible for you in the moment. An antidote to ill will for that hindrance that starts to arise. Third hindrance, sloth and torpor. We've heard it. It reminds me of that animal, the sloth. You know, he's got two really large claws, but he moves really slowly. And torpor meaning that sleepiness, drowsiness. But it's not so much as you're sitting on your cushion and you're getting sleepy. That is part of it. But it's also having the dullness of your mind, just not being interested. That hindrance arises a lot, at least in my practice, it does. And then that starts a whole story. If I don't have any interest in just the practice itself, my mind starts to become dull and I start to reach out to something else that may be more interesting, which is typically the story of the past or the story of the future, whatever it might be, but definitely it's not this present moment. And I have to tell you that, and I have this prompt. I have a prompt for this. I'm going to go get it. Because this is going to be one of the antidotes to restlessness and sleepiness rather, and sloth and torpor. So how many of you have seen a statue of the Buddha like this? Can you see that? And can you see how long his earlobe is? Antidote number 1. When you get sleepy or disinterested, pull on your ear. They say the reason why the Buddha's earlobes are so long is because he fell asleep a lot, right? Pulling on your ear. And possibly, I mean, it sounds silly, but maybe it's true. Who knows, right? 2,600 years ago. But how many of you have been in a meditation center and you've been, after the bell rings, you open your eyes and there's like 4 people standing up? They're standing up because they have gotten to the place of being a little bit drowsy. So that's an antidote, standing up in your practice or opening your eyes. Just open your eyes or looking at a light. And of course, the most important thing is see it, feel it, sense it when it's arising for you. I'm getting sleepy, I'm getting drowsy. Then begin to work at how can I, maybe there's some investigate, maybe I've overeaten. Because I know on my Thanksgiving, for instance, everybody's finished eating. I go into the living room and most of the people are like nodding off. Overeating will do that. It just does. But just begin with a little bit of investigation and interest into why this particular hindrance might be arising for you in your practice and in your daily life. And just, at that point, keeping your eyes open, looking at what makes you sleepy, what makes you drowsy, what makes you dull, the mind dull. So the 4th hindrance, we'll move on to the 4th. I'm just being real conscious of the time. The 4th hindrance is restlessness and worry. And for me, restlessness and worry doesn't just happen in the mind, it happens in my body. Sometimes I am in meditation or sitting and I actually can't sit still. There's something like vibrating in my body. It's like misplaced energy. And you've also heard the term monkey mind, right? Monkeys going from one thought to another, one branch to another. This is how the mind becomes overactive, restless. And then the body and the mind starts to do some worrying around all of it. And it also helps attribute to unwise thoughts because it's so rapid. Antidote. Recognize when it's arising, first and foremost. And what is said to be one of the most important things is practicing equanimity. Just really seeing what is happening in this moment bringing it down to a place of being able to calm yourself, calm the mind, calm the body. And I'm not saying any of this is easy. But once we become interested and curious and start looking at the underbelly of what's going on in our mind, heart, body, we have a deeper understanding and a different way of being able to practice. And another antidote to restlessness and worry, especially with restlessness, is just to get up and walk. Get some energy going, because it's energetic of what's happening, the restlessness. So just getting some maybe fast walking so you can somewhat get a lot of the energy out of your body. So this one we already had our hands raised on. The fifth hindrance, doubt. Why am I listening to this woman talk this evening? What am I doing? I'm kind of doubting the path I'm on. Am I doing it right? How right? How many have thought that, right? Is this practice right? Is this correct? Is what she's saying even make sense? God, it shows up in all these different ways. These are the disguises of doubt. Right? And again, the antidote. First, realize it's arising. It's a mind state, folks. Right? If it arises, it can actually also pass. And start to break it down a little bit. What's the doubt about? What's underneath it? Uncertainty. What's underneath that? Low self-esteem. What's underneath that? Not trusting. What's underneath that? It could go on, but at least you're starting to unearth it, which I think for me is it's just a beautiful way of doing it. And it also can happen in your daily life when you're off the cushion. And they say the other thing that's really good as an antidote is realizing what you're doing in that moment is benefiting not just you, but it's this huge ripple that happens. It's benefiting more beings than just yourself. And when doubt arises, you can bring it back to that state. Oh, my offering here of me sitting on the cushion, the gift that we talked about, right? The beginning of the meditation. This is a gift you've given yourself. 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it might be. This gift is not only benefiting me, begins to take some of the doubt away. And like all of them, of course, remember when they arise. This is our human nature, but it may not always be our true nature. The hindrances are also called by some teachers defilements. I don't particularly like to use that word, but I know Tejaniya uses it as defilements of the mind, because what it does is it impedes the process of deeper concentration. And as the Buddha said in one of the quotes I said, it stops you from moving towards nibbana or freedom or liberation, or truly ending suffering. So lastly, I've got just a few minutes left, a couple of minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about one last thing that the Buddha, just kind of a description of what the Buddha has said about the five hindrances, because I think it's quite interesting. He says, sensual desire is like having a bowl of water with a lot of colors in it. So when you're experiencing that, the water becomes tainted with the colors, and you can't quite see the reflection of your face. And it's the same way that when we're submerged in this state of greed and craving, our whole body and mind are in that state of attraction and attachments. And it's hard to see clearly when we're there, when that's the state in which we have inhabited for the moment. Ill will is like having that same bowl of water, but have it heated and boiling. And you will not be able to see your face very clearly in that because the bubbles will be popping up. The same with aversion that agitates us, causes us to act blindly, aggressively, in destructive ways. When it arises in us, it's like that bubbling water, the boiling water. Torpor, that sleepiness, has been compared to water that's being covered with plants and algae. There's no way that you can even see your reflective quality of yourself in that bowl of water. It's that place in which our laziness, the sloth, we can't think about doing the things that need to be done in a compassionate and active way. Restlessness and worry. It's compared to water that's been disturbed by wind. I mean, you can almost see it, right? The ripples are just the bowl of water. Too many ripples for you to even see your reflection. This is the restless mind, the worried mind. And lastly, doubt. And doubt is compared to having a muddy or opaque bowl of water. You cannot see your reflection. You cannot even see through the water. And with this doubt, it's very difficult to have skillful means, to be able to call up how we want to be in wise community and wise relations and wise speech, all of those things of the Eightfold Path, when things are so muddied and our minds are muddied and muddled. So the Buddha has given us, again, the great physician that he is, he's given us these prescriptions, these antidotes, these ways in which we can look at what's happening in our mind state. And again, it's a choice. We have a choice to make in our practice and in our daily lives. The hindrances have been one of the most difficult practices for me. But once I am on a path of just identifying when they're arising and seeing if they're there present with me, once I've kind of gone through that list or of investigation, for me, it has brought me to a place of a deeper calm. In which case, at that moment, and I can only say that moment, in that moment, I can actually breathe deeper and deeply go into the present moment. Stay there. It's practice. All of this is really practice for us. And I encourage you just to think about these hindrances because they're in all of us. I'm just not saying they're in me. They're in all of us. And the Buddha has given us, he's given us what we need to move through them. So in closing, because I'm looking at the time, I want to offer you another Rumi poem that I think kind of speaks to this talk tonight. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Thank you, Sangha, for your kind attention this evening. I've so enjoyed being with you and your practice. I've so enjoyed the wealth and what I have felt from you. So thank you again for the invitation.